Hey guys, Nikki here. Today on this show, we are going to be talking about how WWE should book a second Evolution pay-per-view. Now, when the first Evolution happened back in 2018, it was, in my opinion, a huge success. It was a great step forward for women's wrestling, and, there wasn't a really bad match on the card, I would say. It furthered a lot of stories, and I thought it was a really good show. And for some reason, WWE hasn't capitalized on it since then. I thought the prevailing theory was that this was going to become a yearly thing. Around Survivor Series time, we would have another one of these women's pay-per-views, and just hasn't happened. Well, in this timeline, it's gonna happen. I would have Evolution 2 take place in late October, early November, around the same time that it was back in 2018, and part of the draw of the show will be deciding the main event of Survivor Series, which will be a triple threat between all of WWE's women's champions, since all three of those titles will be on the line here. There's also the question of who will hold each championship going into Evolution 2, but most of the titles will be held by the same people who are holding them at the time of this recording. Bayley will still be the SmackDown Women's Champion, and she and Sasha Banks will still have the women's tag titles. Io Shirai still has the NXT Women's title, while Kaylee Ray has the NXT UK Women's title, although that's kind of by default since that show's on hold right now. The only title that's changed hands between now and Evolution 2 is the Raw Women's title, which will belong to Shayna Baszler. I'll get into the details later, but just know that Shayna has the title and Asuka is still chasing her. Starting on the pre-show, I would have the Iconics flip out on the pre-show host about how the most popular, funniest, smartest, best looking, and best wrestling team in the entire women's division is on the sidelines for the biggest pay-per-view in women's division history. This is an injustice that will not go unpunished! But then, Renee says, I hate to cut you off, but I'm getting word from Triple H that you guys can have a match, but you have to get to the ring right now. They scurry off, and Renee can be overheard thanking Triple H for getting those harpies away from her. The Iconics still don't know who their opponents are yet when they get to the ring, but they're confident as usual. And out comes Kacy Catanzaro. By herself at first, and the Iconics are laughing at her like, "Ha ha, you're on your own, you nerd." But then, Tegan Nox comes out alongside her, and they rush the ring, catching them off guard. Nox and Catanzaro gain the early advantage, wiping out both Kay and Royce with a suicide dive and a corkscrew plancha respectively. Kacy actually looks like she has Peyton Royce on the ropes, but Royce manages to roll her up with her feet on the ropes, and the Iconics get the dirty win on Nox and Catanzaro. And they walk away talking about how great they are and how they want the tag team champions. From there, I would have the show kick off with a banger of a ladder match. The winner of this match can basically pick whatever champion they want to challenge, and they'll get that title match before the end of the year. There are qualifying matches on Raw, SmackDown, and NXT to decide who gets into the match. And those would include Natalya beating Liv Morgan, Ruby Riott over Nia Jax, Alexa Bliss over Lacey Evans, Dana Brooke over Tamina, Mia Yim over Candice LeRae, Dakota Kai over Shotzi Blackheart, and Toni Storm winning a last chance battle royale. Mia Yim comes out first, but Dakota Kai cheap shots her from behind and makes a mad dash for the contract hanging above the ring, prompting everyone else to run out from backstage as well. The only rule is first to grab the contract wins. No one said anything about a bell ringing or anything, so they all go for it, and the match is underway. Alexa Bliss goes into the match as the favorite, and she tries to stay away from the big spots like she did the year she won Money in the Bank. But this year, everyone catches on to that plan, and they pounce on her several times throughout. Natalya and Dana Brooke briefly team up with one another since they're probably the two strongest women in this match. But right as the ring clears, Natty drops Dana with a facebuster and makes a break for the contract. Ruby Riott sees this and goes up the other side, and Riott and Natty brawl at the top of the ladder. Dana recovers, pushes the ladder over, resets it, and starts climbing, but Toni Storm leaps from the top rope onto Dana's back and delivers the mother of all backstabbers to Dana. Toni's all alone. She climbs up, claims the contract, earning a title match of her choosing. Next up, we have a match for the SmackDown Women's title. Now, up until this point, things are going swimmingly for Bayley and Sasha Banks. I mean, yeah, here in this story, Sasha doesn't beat Asuka for the Raw Women's title, but they're still the tag champs, and Bayley is still the SmackDown Women's champion, so it's all good. Right after October's Hell in a Cell, there's a fatal four-way to decide the number one contender for Bayley's title at Evolution. Alexa Bliss versus Mandy Rose versus Carmella versus Sonya Deville. Near the end, Sonya takes over. She grabs Alexa Bliss and locks her in an ankle lock. Carmella breaks it up, but Sonya grabs her and locks her in a gogoplata. Sonya nearly gets the tap there, but then Mandy Rose comes in to make the save. Sonya goes behind Mandy and locks on a Kimura lock and gets the tap. Sonya is a submission wizard who can mess up joints from any angle, and that's got Bayley a bit worried. Now, I know that Sonya's a heel right now, but I feel like the fans are starting to recognize her strong work during this Mandy feud, so if WWE capitalizes on this momentum, they could totally turn her face, or at least make her into a tweener, and make her a viable contender for Bayley's title. Especially since Bayley has backup, and can attack Sonya 2-on-1 with Sasha to help establish Sonya as the face here. They just beat down Sonya whenever they get the chance, and while Sonya does manage to fend them off once or twice, ultimately, Bayley and Banks have the momentum on their side heading into Evolution. Until the show itself, that is. Bayley is getting ready backstage when a referee comes up to her and says that Sasha has been attacked. The doctors need to check up on her so she won't be able to accompany Bayley to the ring for her match. Bayley storms off, furious at Sonya, and partially at Sasha for letting this happen. Sonya comes out first, carrying a tuft of Sasha's blue hair. Bayley comes out to attack her, but Sonya sees it coming and turns around to start trading strikes with her. Bayley's furious and starts fighting even more aggressively than normal, but Sonya uses that sloppiness to get the upper hand and get Bayley into a variety of different submission holds. Eventually, Bayley gets locked in the Kimura, but right as that happens, Sasha hobbles out and distracts the ref while Bayley taps out. However, Sonya, not being an idiot, keeps the hold on until the ref sees it, and once Bayley starts screaming in agony from the lock, the ref turns, sees the tap, and calls for the bell. Sonya is the new SmackDown Women's Champion, and all Sasha did was let Deville hurt Bayley's arm that much more. Tension is rising. So while the commentary team is talking about Sonya's gigantic victory, Kaylee Ray comes out, and she has some grievances to air. She says that Survivor Series is going to be built around all of the women's champions except her. The UK brand deserves more respect than WWE is giving it, so she's gonna put the brand on the map herself. She challenges anyone who wants a crack at the UK women's title. Suddenly, this is my brutality! Out comes the first ever NXT UK Women's Champion, Rhea Ripley, who steamrolls KLR. She decimates Kaylee, hits the Riptide, stands her back up, and drops her with the big boot, because Adam Blampier is right, her big boot looks like a killer. She beats Kaylee Ray, reclaims the UK Women's Championship, and regularly defends it on NXT as an unofficial Women's Midcard Championship. As a side note, I would move most of the UK division over to NXT for the time being, at least the people who can get over here, while NXT UK is on hold. Next up is a match for the NXT Women's Championship, Io Shirai versus Mercedes Martinez. Now, I don't know why WWE hasn't decided to start pushing Mercedes Martinez into being their top heel, but they could totally start at any time. She did pick up a win at the Great American Bash, and now she's aligned with Robert Stone. That's something. So maybe WWE agrees and will start to push her sometime soon. I would just keep that push going, only not having her be aligned with Robert Stone. That's just... She carves a path of destruction over the next couple of months, and a couple of weeks before Evolution, there's a gauntlet match to decide the number one contender for Shirai's title. Mercedes shows up about halfway through and gets the final 4 eliminations by herself to score the win and punch her ticket to Evolution to make her look like a big beefy challenger. During the contract signing, she just bullies Io, because why wouldn't she? She grabs the pen out of Shirai's hands and just tosses it towards the crowd. Cheeky little smile on her face. William Regal gives Io another pen, and Martinez pushes the contract off the table, daring Io to do something about it. So she does. She stands up, Mercedes stands up too, and Io leaps off the table, giving Martinez a rising knee strike. The two brawl for a little bit before Mercedes takes the advantage and hits the Fisherman Buster on Io through the signing table. The match at Evolution is a simple story of the lightning-fast Shirai getting in whatever shot she can versus the powerhouse Martinez, who can send Shirai reeling with one good strike. At one point, Shirai tries for a Super Frankensteiner from Brett's rope, but Mercedes just goes, "Ha, no!" and keeps her from leaning back into the move and just power bombs the hell out of her for a 2.99. Shirai recovers, knees Mercedes while she's in the Fisherman Buster position, and just knee strikes Mercedes to death. One to the top of her dome gets her out of the Fisherman Buster, and then just one knee after another until she's back in the corner. Then sprinting knee strikes over and over and over again until Mercedes is out cold. Follow that up with her picture-perfect moonsault, and Io puts down Mercedes in a barn burner of a match. Shirai doesn't have much time to celebrate though, because as she's leaving the ring, Toni Storm's music hits, and she meets Shirai on the entrance ramp. She shoves the contract into Io's chest, and the camera shows that Toni has already signed it, and it's a title match against Shirai, and it just needs her signature. Now, WWE has Bianca Belair on their roster, I'm pretty sure, but for some reason they just don't seem to know how to properly use her, or use her in any way. She's been getting matches on Main Event, but like, that's it. Like, they could definitely afford to use her a little bit more. So I would have Bianca Belair start racking up wins on Raw over whoever they can, even if it's just taking the matches from Main Event over to Raw. Just have Bianca Belair start racking up wins, including a big win over Nia Jax. Bianca seems like she's ready for primetime, and during a number one contenders match for Evolution between Bianca and Asuka, Charlotte Flair makes her grand return and sits at ringside watching the match. Both parties go, okay, and keep fighting for their now slightly larger audience. Bianca is actually doing really good and might be closing in on a win, but Charlotte stands up and approaches the ring as Bianca tries to get Asuka up for the kiss of death. Asuka gets out and slaps on the Asuka lock while Charlotte walks to the back and Bianca taps. Next week, Charlotte talks about coming back from her surgery and talks about getting back into title contention where she rightfully deserves to be. But Bianca interrupts her and gets all up into Charlotte's face about causing the distraction that cost Bianca the match. But Charlotte blows it off, saying Bianca has a lot to learn. For example, don't let anything distract you from the task at hand, and also always, Charlotte spears Bianca! Be on your guard. Bianca versus Charlotte is then signed for Evolution, and while it's never explicitly stated as a number one contenders match, it does have major title implications. In the match, Charlotte is in control for a good chunk of it, but Bianca gets shots in here and there with her hair whip. At one point, both women go for a spear at the same time, and they just collide in the middle of the ring and locked in combat like a couple of sumos. Near the end, Charlotte gets the figure four locked in and is trying to bridge it, but this exposes Charlotte's midsection, and Bianca just goes to town on her with the hair whip. Bianca gains the advantage, hulks Charlotte up for the kiss of death, and hits it, but she wants to be sure. So she ascends to the top rope, hits a 450 splash for good measure. 1, 2, 3. Bianca has pulled off the biggest win of her career and will likely be next in line for whoever wins out of Asuka versus Shayna Baszler. Next up is a women's tag team title match. Tonight's been about as terrible of a night for Bayley and Sasha as it can get, and because of that, it's an equally lucky night for Naomi and Carmella. Bayley's been icing her arm for the last 90 minutes and her scowling muscles are just about worn out. Sasha is a little bit better from that attack from Sonya, but she still isn't quite 100% yet, and is still apologizing to Bayley for hurting her in Sonya's Kimura. And now they have to face the highly energetic duo of Naomi and Carmella. Bad times. Sasha starts the match, and Bayley says she'll tag in when she's ready. Sasha holds her own against Naomi and tries to tag out to Bayley, but Bayley isn't ready yet, so the match continues. Naomi tags in the fresh Carmella, and now Sasha needs to tag out, but Bayley still leaves her on red. Eventually, Carmella and Naomi get rolling, and Sasha's in a bad place. They Irish whip Sasha into her own corner, and Sasha accidentally elbows Bayley, causing her to fall off the apron and land on her injured arm. At this point, Bayley says, "To hell with this," walks to the back, leaving Sasha to fend for herself, which she doesn't do for very long. Naomi hits the split-legged moonsault, and Carmella locks on the Code of Silence, and that's all, folks. Naomi and Carmella win the women's tag titles, and the dance breaks are numerous. After the match, Michael Cole does an interview from the commentary table with Becky Lynch, who's sitting comfortably in her home with a very visible baby bump. She talks about the matches that have happened so far, about how the other horsewomen have been having a pretty rough go tonight. They've gone 0 for 3. She says the pregnancy has been going very well. She'll be about 7 or 8 months along by this point, so she'll know the gender of the baby and all that other great motherly stuff. Michael asks, "Once the baby is born, when do you think you'll be eyeing a comeback to the ring?" And before she can answer, Shayna Baszler comes out and steals Byron Saxton's headset so that she can hear the conversation. Shayna says, "Don't let me interrupt. I was just curious myself on to when I can beat you up again." Becky, who's still better on the mic after a 6-month layoff than most wrestlers are in their prime, says, "Well, whenever that time comes, it'll be the first time you actually beat me up, seeing as how I beat you the only other time we fought." Shayna just blows it off though, saying that she heard through the grapevine that she was already trying for a kid during the build to their Mania match. So it felt kind of weird fighting someone who might already have a kid in them. So once the baby's born, come on back to the E so I can send you right back to your house. Here, I'll even defend my title, before throwing away Byron's mic and heading down to the ring for the main event of the evening. So Shayna's been holding the Raw Women's title since SummerSlam, when she was victorious in a 4-way that also featured champion Asuka, Sasha Banks, and Kairi Sane. Baszler would pin Sane, and then the next night on Raw, Shayna would kill off Kairi with a brutal backstage assault. Asuka would get a one-on-one rematch against Shayna at Hell in a Cell, but after getting beaten up for a healthy chunk of the match, Shayna eventually says, "Screw this, I'll fight Asuka another time," and took the count-out loss. However, this would lead to a wild brawl that spans most of the Performance Center. Yes, these shows are still airing from the Performance Center. We're gonna be here for a while. On the next couple of Raws, Baszler and Asuka keep going at it in the locker room, in the parking lot, in the weight room, basically whenever they lock eyes. So at the contract signing, which has to be held in separate locations, it's announced that the match will be the main event of Evolution and will be Falls Count Anywhere with no disqualifications. Both women like the decision, with Shayna trash-talking Asuka on one side of the split screen, while Asuka just smiles a devilish smile. At Evolution, Baszler is already in the ring after yelling at Becky, and she's just waiting on Asuka. When she comes out, Baszler rolls out of the ring, and they just start going to town on each other. This is nothing resembling a wrestling match. This looks more like a fight in an alleyway. They throw each other into walls and lockers. At one point, Shayna throws Asuka through a window, which busts Asuka open, but that's not the 3 count because Shayna can't get into the room that Asuka's been thrown into because it's locked. Asuka, enraged at the sight of her own blood, starts pummeling Shayna, and it looks like she's on the verge of a victory when suddenly 2 women attack Asuka from behind. It's Jessamyn Duke and Marina Shafir. They make their main roster debut right here, helping Shayna regain the advantage. Asuka makes a couple of valiant efforts to fight off all 3 women, but the odds are just too great, and Shayna manages to get on the Kirifuda clutch. Asuka keeps fighting to try to get out of the hold, and the sight of her face covered in blood, violently trying to escape the hold, could invoke images of Stone Cold Steve Austin at Mania 13. Asuka fights and fights, but just like Austin, passes out from the hold, and Shayna retains the title. The show closes with Shayna standing tall over an unconscious Asuka with the Raw Women's title and her fellow MMA horsewomen flanking her. After Evolution, I would have Bianca Belair challenge Shayna for the next couple of pay-per-views and get close a couple of times, but Shayna will keep a hold of the title. Sonya Deville will hang on to the SmackDown Women's title for a good long while before eventually losing it at Mania to the Royal Rumble winner, prepare thy jimmies, Ronda Rousey. Bayley and Sasha will finally have that epic feud we've all been looking forward to, with Bayley attacking Sasha on the next SmackDown, and that'll culminate in a last woman standing match at the Royal Rumble, which Sasha would win. Naomi and Carmella would drop the tag straps pretty quickly to Jessamine Duke and Marina Shafir, meaning all 4 of the MMA horsewomen will hold gold during WrestleMania, so long as Rousey's match is early in the card. I would have Shayna keep the Raw strap all the way till Mania until she loses it to the Elimination Chamber winner, Becky Lynch. And it's at this point that I would have Becky start rallying the WWE horsewomen into a genuine feud with the MMA horsewomen. Meanwhile in NXT, Io Shirai and Toni Storm would face off, with Shirai getting the win over her. She'll later get into a feud with Dakota Kai, and Io will drop the title to her with the help of Raquel Gonzalez. And finally, Rhea Ripley will eventually drop the UK Women's title to Mercedes Martinez, and will eventually pursue Kai and the NXT Women's title, and will reclaim the belt from her. So I think that ties up all the loose ends on this story. Thank you guys very much, and I'll see y'all later.